Though the earliest known fashion photographs date back to the 1850s, in the court of Napoleon III, the use of photography as an advertising tool did not become popular until the early 20th century, when fashion itself became accessible to a wider audience. The first fashion magazines, Harper's Bazaar and Vogue, both founded in the late 1800s, were initially illustrated by hand. It was not until Condé Nast hired Baron Adolphe de Meyer in 1913 to shoot portraits of models, actresses, and aristocrats for Vogue that photographs began to be used in fashion editorials. The importance of magazines grew in the early 20th century as collaborations with designers increased. Ready-to-wear lines and department stores increased the accessibility of couture fashion, and trends were adopted and disseminated internationally. With the help of photography, rising couturiers in the 1920s and 1930s, such as Chanel, Schiaparelli, Balenciaga, and Lanvin, each became known for their distinctive styles. Paris was the center of the fashion world at this time, and photographers such as Horst P. Horst, Man Ray, Cecil Beaton, Edward Steichen, George Hoyningen-Huene, Erwin Blumenfeld and Willy Maywald flocked there. Those who remember anything from fashion history will recall a classic black and white image of Christian Dior's iconic bar suit in 1947. That perfectly structured jacket cut at the waist and with a wide skirt broke with the austere styles, dictated by World War II, and officially launched the new look, propelling a new era of fashion and bringing Dior worldwide fame. But that image is also important for another reason. It was taken by Willy Maywald. He was undoubtedly the photographer of the time, one of the most interesting fashion photographers and artist portraits of his time, as well as being the undisputed specialist in hats. His style was similar to what his contemporaries Dior or Balmain did in clothing, and in some way summarizes the trend of the late 40s and early 50s. If I had to describe him, the word I would use most would be elegance. Born in Germany, Maywald studied it in Cologne and Berlin, and like all photographers of that era had to emigrate to Paris for political reasons in 1932. Living in the theatrical setting of Montparnasse, Maywald turned it into the scenes of his poses. In addition to allowing him to photograph neighboring artists from the neighborhood, and fashion creations by designers Piguet and Schiaparelli. The arrival of World War II marked a new, less glamorous adventure in his life. After being imprisoned in several camps for foreigners in Switzerland, in 1943 he was able to return to work for publications in Zurich and Basel. At the end of the war he returned to Paris and resumed his fashion photography career. He was one of the first photographers to take images of haute couture models in street settings, and became the exclusive photographer for Christian Dior, whom he had met briefly in 1936. Maywald also worked for other couturiers, and for collections by Jacques Heim, Jacques Fath, Madame Gray. In 1954 he took a picture of a bare-breasted caryatid-like model in a grey dress that perfectly shows the classicism of the designer, Pierre Balmain, Jean Paquin, and Cristóbal Balenciaga. Integrated in the artistic environment, he portrayed all those who made Paris the city of the time. The list is long and includes Picasso, Fernand Léger, Nico, Marc Chagall, Le Corbusier, Jean Cocteau, Jean-Louis Barrault and Tamara Lempicka. At the end of his career he turned to architecture and interiors. Willy Maywald ended his career as a fashion photographer in 1968, with images of Jean Lanvin, Nina Ricci, Patou, and André Courrèges. The first major exhibitions of his work took place in Philadelphia and New York in 1981, and in Houston and New York in 1982, and he died in Paris in May 1985. His talent for composing images with a quality that gave his shots a sculptural quality. In Maywald's images, the fundamental black and white became 100 different shades. Always glamorous, his models may be seated at a table in an outdoor cafe, standing in the streets of the French capital, or in an elegant interior. They are all meticulously dressed, and the use of veiled hats added an air of mystery. Apart from being elegant, sensual and poetic, his photographs are important as accounts of life in his time. What is called spirit of the times. He was interesting, cultured and modest. He never stopped living in the bohemian Montparnasse. He managed to illuminate like no one else the fabrics, to the point of knowing exactly the type of fabric with which the dress was made. The textures were present. He was the photographer who best portrayed Paris. His photos say a lot about the creative and effervescent atmosphere during the first half of the 20th century, in what was considered the cultural capital of the Western world. Thanks for your watching. Your Valerie.